If you only know Thanos from his role as the MCU's biggest bad guy, you're missing out on a few puzzle pieces from the Mad Titan's long comics history. But don't worry, we are here to bring you the things about Thanos that didn't make it to the MCU. In the MCU, Thanos is motivated in his mission of galactic genocide by an obsession with balance. It's the cause that makes him believe that for all of the horrors he's perpetrating, he's actually doing something noble and good, preventing the misery he experienced on his own home planet that came from overpopulation and strained resources. It's a pretty flawed belief, but he believes it to the very core of his being. Believe it or not, that's a pretty big departure from his comic book counterpart, who believes in nothing. In several comics, including those written by his creator Jim Starlin, Thanos is frequently referred to as the ultimate nihilist. For those of you who slept through your early morning philosophy class or missed it in The Big Lebowski, nihilism is a philosophical movement that picked up steam in the mid-19th century. In its most basic form, nihilism states that nothing really exists or matters. It can be applied to different branches of philosophy, but it most commonly refers to existential nihilism, the belief that there's no intrinsic meaning or significance to life, or moral nihilism, the belief that one's actions are completely devoid of ethical value. In that view, doing something like, say, interplanetary mass murder is neither good nor evil. It simply is, with no more moral weight than eating a peanut butter sandwich or petting a dog. That's what makes the Thanos of the comics such a compelling and frightening villain, especially when he's pitted against characters who almost universally represent the idea that one's abilities and actions do have meaning and consequence. Or, to put it another way, they have great power, and because of it, great responsibility. For Thanos, that responsibility just doesn't exist. He's not fighting the heroes because he hates them. He's fighting them because there's no reason not to. He's not trying to complete the Infinity Gauntlet because he wants to control the universe, but because attaining absolute control over reality is the only way to literally do anything that matters at all. For all of our cheerful talk of nihilism and the futility of existence, it's worth noting that the Thanos of the comics page isn't entirely without motivation. It's not a dedication to balance, though, or a twisted attempt to correct the suffering of his past. It's that Thanos just straight up wants to get his bone on, in a very literal sense. In the comics, Thanos is in love with death. Not the concept per se, but the lady-shaped embodiment thereof. See, in the Marvel Universe, the most fundamental concepts, stuff like order, chaos, love, hate, eternity, and so on, exist both as abstract ideas and as beings with physical forms. Death is one of those, and apparently her physical form is very appealing to Thanos, despite the fact that she's usually represented as an upsettingly shapely skeleton, and only occasionally has things that most of us would find attractive, like skin or eyeballs. After seeing death as a thirsty teen, Thanos decides that the best way to impress her would be to kill as many living beings as possible, giving countless souls to her in the nihilistic cosmic equivalent of subscribing to her OnlyFans. Unsurprisingly, this didn't really work out that well because, she's deaf. And giving her dead people is sort of like giving a heart-shaped box of chocolates to Willy Wonka. Despite taking a keen interest in Thanos and his exploits, Death remains distant, and she's actually way more into Deadpool, with whom she shacks up during his brief periods of being dead while his healing factor stitches his body back together. No joke, the Thanos-Deadpool-Death love triangle is 100% canon. If you're in the roughly 100% of people living on the planet Earth who saw Avengers Infinity War, you know the Mad Titan's ultimate goal after assembling all 6 of the Infinity Stones is to wipe out half of the sentient life in the universe with a single snap of his fingers. This actually is something that was brought to screen directly from the comics. What didn't make it was the context. On the screen, the end of billions and billions of lives across the galaxy is what Thanos has been working towards for 10 years. It's the culmination of his plan, the end that has justified all his horrendous means. But in the comics, it's just his opening act. Halfway through 1991's The Infinity Gauntlet #1, not even the climax of the first issue, Thanos attempts to prove both his incredible power and his devotion to death by killing half the universe with a snap of his fingers. It's meant to be a chilling depiction of how powerful he's become, that such a massive act can happen just like that. Of course, it also has the benefit of keeping the cast at a manageable size and getting rid of problematic characters like Daredevil, who wouldn't fit with the cosmic action, and the Fantastic Four, who have too much experience with cosmic battles. It's definitely one of the most memorable moments of the story, although removing it from that context gives the movie's Infinity Saga one of its weirdest little quirks. In the comics, the snapping of fingers is meant to illustrate how effortless it is. In the movie, it's apparently something you have to do in order to use the stones, something that has the biggest ratio of inherent silliness to serious presentation in the entire franchise. Forget about the head, Thor should have aimed for the thumbs. Stop us if you've heard this one. There's a comic book about this kid who's a child of a prominent family, but he feels like an outcast due to the fears and doubts he has about himself. One day, he falls into a cave, and while the experience is frightening for him, it also comes to define him, forcing him to confront and embrace a darker side of himself and shaping his future. You know about that, right? Of course you do.
My bats lost away.
That's frightened me. This time my enemies shared my dread.
Everyone knows about the secret origin of Thanos. Wait, who are you thinking of? Okay, yes, the broad strokes of the origin have a few notable similarities to a certain Dark Knight published by Marvel's distinguished competition, but the details are very different. See, when he was a kid back on Titan, Thanos was quiet and reserved and thought of himself as an outcast until he finally made a few friends at Immortal Space God Elementary School. In an effort to impress his new pals, little Thanos led them into a cave in search of gems, the same activity that would come to define his adult life. Unfortunately, it wasn't a great field trip. The floor gave way beneath him, and he was separated from his buddies, buried under rubble. He was down there for 3 days, and despite the fact that he was surrounded by lizard creatures that he could have easily eaten for sustenance, he chose to remain hungry rather than take another life, as he tried to dig his way out before he finally lost his strength. Then came the ironic twist. When he did finally dig himself out, he found that those same creatures that he wouldn't eat even to save his own life had no such compunctions of their own, and they'd eaten his friends, leaving only a pair of skeletons. Little T was horrified, and after he escaped the cave, he later returned to exact some lethal revenge, giving him his first taste of what it was like to take a life. The movies don't really get into Thanos' history, preferring to show him as more of a force of nature than someone who's suffered childhood trauma. But unless Marvel Studios wanted Bruce Wayne's lawyers to come knocking, they probably would have left this one out anyway. Most of Thanos' twisty backstory is left on the page purely for concerns of space and streamlining. The chunk of the Mad Titan's origin story that we see in Cosmic Ghost Rider, however, is unlikely to ever make it to the page by virtue of being weird even by Marvel standards. See if you can keep up with this one. Cosmic Ghost Rider was, well, a cosmically powered version of Ghost Rider from an alternate future, who rode across space on a flaming motorcycle as a herald of that future's version of Thanos, who succeeded in eliminating every single person on Earth. Despite speaking with a goofy, insane patter that made it seem like he might have been Deadpool underneath his demonically flaming skull, it turned out that CGR was actually Frank Castle, better known as the Punisher. After being killed in Earth's fight with Thanos and sent to hell for, all the murders, Frank made a deal with the devil to punish the wicked, only to return to a barren planet that had no life, wicked or otherwise, for him to punish. The decades of isolation drove him to madness, and then he became the Herald of Galactus, obtaining the power cosmic in an attempt to get revenge on Thanos. But he then turned on Galactus when Thanos offered to take him to the larger Marvel multiverse, with endless evil people to punish. Phew. That's his origin story. And since we haven't even gotten to the part that affects the primary Thanos yet, you likely already know why this one won't make it onto film anytime soon. After finding his way to the core Marvel universe, the Cosmic Castle decided to rectify the mistakes of his past. And after traveling back in time, he abducted Thanos from Titan as a baby in hopes of raising him to be somewhat less genocidal. Surprise, surprise, being parented by a serial killer possessed as a vengeance demon didn't create the pacifist Thanos that CGR hoped it would. In fact, it made him even worse. The writer tried to undo his error and return baby Thanos to his proper point in the time stream, but he was informed by Death herself that his actions had imprinted the tendency towards violence on little T that he would display as an adult. Good job, Frank. Loki might have been the driving force behind the Avengers formation, and Ultron's actions were so devastating that it tore the team apart, but in the big picture, they're small time. Thanos is the biggest bad guy in the entire MCU, and not just because of his evil schemes. He's a physical powerhouse, able to land a truly brutal beatdown to the Hulk, survive being axed by Thor, and go toe-to-toe with Captain Marvel and her nearly infinite cosmic power. He needs to be that powerful to justify not just a decade and lurking in the background as a looming threat, but 2 movies that feature him as the primary villain who needs every single hero in the universe to rally together to defeat him.
I am inevitable.
So naturally, the filmmakers left out the time that he got trounced by Doreen Green, the unbeatable Squirrel Girl. If you're not familiar with her, the unbeatable isn't an exaggeration. Invested with the powers of both girl and squirrel, including the proportionate strength and agility of the common ground squirrel and exceptionally sharp front teeth, Squirrel Girl beat Dr. Doom in her first appearance and has remained undefeated in the years since. It's become something of a running gag and a fundamental truth of the Marvel Universe that you just can't beat her, no matter how much you might theoretically outclass squirrel powers. She once handed Thanos a first-round knockout on Christmas Eve, and the Watcher showed up to confirm that this one was the real deal. Kind of weird that they didn't call her for backup during Endgame, huh? Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.